We are live. Hello, Motor Rider World fans, and welcome to this episode of Talking MotoGP Phillip Island with myself, Rob Portman, and my good mate Paul Scott joining me once again, and everyone along in the comment section that's going to be coming from Facebook and YouTube land. So thank you so much. Tune in, and remember, the first thing you need to do is hit that like, subscribe button if you're on YouTube, like, and share on Facebook. Let's spread the word as much as possible. A big thank you to Ridgeway Race Bar as well for sponsoring what is essentially South Africa's only MotoGP talk show, certainly the only live MotoGP talk show that there is in Africa, just about. So very proud of that, and a big thank you to Ridgeway Race Bar for getting behind us. I don't know if it's Denise or Dennis Gawler that's been waiting for a while. Very excited to get this discussion going. Damien Muir, good evening, everyone. What a race. You have to love Phillip Island. Yvonne Pretorius, evening, Rob. Hope you and the family are safe in the UK. Yvonne, yes, we are. Thank you so much. Enjoying it. Just rushed back from some pumpkin picking. So picked about 15 pumpkins that we've now got to squeeze into our tiny little flat somehow, and then we're going to do our Halloween thing. So yeah, loving it this side. Thank you very much. Bronwyn Holmes, Bradley Johnson, John McLaughlin, Daryl Bryson III, Wayne Taylor, Edgar de Agua, Andre Velman, Nicole Briet, Ronaldo Poltron, all tuning in. Andre Veltman, a very good evening to you, and happy Tuesday for Epping Forest, from Epping Forest, UK. P.S. I'm still recovering from this weekend's great sporting. Go SA, MotoGP, rugby, and cricket. It was a jam-packed weekend of sporting action. There's no doubt about that. Sean and Ronnie, good. My good mates from this side in the UK. Hope you are well. Haven't spoken to you in a while, but hope you guys are keeping well. Adrian Cole Rousseau, Kaz Weeks, everyone is joining us. So please hit that like button. Let's get as many likes as we possibly can. It's going to be a great show. It always is going to be great when you're talking Phillip Island. Paul, hope you well. I heard you also had a very busy weekend, just also on two wheels, but of the pedaling kind that you like to do.
Yeah, Rob, fantastic to be on the show again. And once again, hello and good evening to everyone. And once again, a big thank you to Ridgeway Race Bar. Yeah, Rob, I went and raced. It's called Amashova, which is Pietermaritzburg to Durban, 105 Ks. If you're a regular cyclist, not a big deal. Maritzburg to Durban, downhill the whole way, or so they say. But let me just tell you, I've been cycling for in excess of 30 years. By far the worst conditions I've ever ridden my bicycle in. Bucketing rain, windy, cold, miserable, exactly what you don't want on a bicycle. But you know, we're tough. So we were there, we did it. And yeah, anyway, so luckily that sprint race was cancelled. So I got back, I could actually sleep for 2 hours instead of studying MotoGP.
There we go. Eugene O'Brien's asking, evening, Rob and Paul, what was your time, Paul?
2:56, I think. 2 hours 56.
That's not bad. It would probably take me 2 days and 56 hours to cycle. I've done a bit of cycling in my life, I must be honest. I went with Aaron Brown, who was
wow, it was top, man.
Yeah, he was a top cyclist. I did obviously with Shez, who's fantastic. I did a bit with Brad and them as well, but it's just not my thing. I'm just not. Yeah. I'm not. My stature isn't built for those bicycle seats.
You're built for the downhills, Rob.
That's exactly what I'm built for, the downhills. Paul, stop saying the word side, Rob. Charms and Tommy, stop saying the word side. Where did I say side? I don't know what that means. Yeah. Charms and Tommy, tell me where I say side. Don't know why I keep saying side. Nicole Brett, hello, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us. Stephen Golgoxy, always in the house. Eugene O'Brien says, wow, Paul. So that's obviously a really good time. Well done there. Ladies and gentlemen, MotoGP Phillip Island. Now, if you follow our Facebook page, you would have seen that I did a video on Saturday after the race. Oh, this side, meaning the UK side. Okay, I understand what you're saying. Sorry about that. UK and South Africa. Paul's in South Africa, and I'm in the UK. And you know, a lot of people, when you watch the race this weekend, there's no wonder why Phillip Island just always produces fantastic motorcycle racing. And when you think of it, it's a fast-flowing nature of the track. As we kind of said before, riders tend to ride over the problem of the bike. It's just a track that gets everyone going and everyone's able to compete, as we saw again in many ways this past weekend. But after that race, I sat down and I really thought about it, and watching that race, how nice it was. There were no race direction interruptions. There was only the one real incident with Luca Marini and Joan Mir heading into the Miller hairpin. Other than that, there was none of this long lap. There were no long laps. It was just pure, right, guys, you go and race and may the best man win. And that's exactly what happened. And it was thrilling racing. And why does this happen? And then you look at it again, and we're so used to tracks now with wider track limits, and for safety, they've extended the track here. And, they're giving riders more opportunity to push the limits. And it's been a bad exercise because riders will take as much as you give them, and then they get penalized for it. And this is where the whole argument comes up. But anyway, Phillip Island doesn't suffer from this problem. They've kept it old school. There's a curb and there's grass. In one or two areas, yes, there's a little bit of runoff, like the Miller hairpin. We saw a couple of riders break and go off and stuff. But that runoff's kind of always been there. But majority of the track is, you have to respect this track. And if you don't, the track will fight back, and the track will hurt you. And you can see the riders respect it. And that just produces great racing. They ride within the limits of the track and the capabilities of it. And there was just no outside interference. It was the riders go and do what they do best. It was fantastic. And Phillip Island, Paul, once again, just did not disappoint.
Yeah, Rob, absolutely. What you're saying is on the money. I've always been of the opinion that the faster the average speed of the track, the better the racing is, for whatever reason. I think because it allows the riders to use the potential of the bike, first of all, and to show their skill. You take Mugello, go back, when last did we race at Hockenheim? 15 years ago, World Superbike. Can you remember how good that racing was?
Mm-hmm.
I've always been of that opinion, and having never been a top motorcycle racer like yourself, Shares, I can't say what that reason is. But having a look at it as a pure outsider, when you go to the point and squirt tracks, you always seem to have more problems, whether it's because guys are now having to compensate for a portion of the bike that's not quite there, whether it's the braking, whether it's the Honda and Yamaha accelerating out of the corners with too much or no edge grip and wheel spin, whatever it is, I don't know. But certainly the fast tracks always seem to have better racing and less incidents.
Yeah.
Exactly what you're saying. Yes, we know Phillip Island, your margins are very limited. If you do run off the track, you're on the grass. All tracks 15 years ago. But safety-wise, I think the tracks today are better than what they were. But the riders know that there is no margin for error. So you've got to be picture perfect. And if you're not, you're going to pay a price. And that price on a motorcycle is you fall off and you end up in a kitty litter. It's not like a car where you can run two wheels off the track, but two of them are still okay. So I think that also comes into being. But once again, Phillip Island, like we said last week going into this week, no matter what, so we had the weather on Sunday, but Saturday, once again, Phillip Island at its absolute best.
And before I get into a little bit more of that, Shams and Tommy, this side of the world, rugby got the English up in arms. One of the players used that word that is very confusing in the Afrikaans language. And let me tell you, it was a huge uproar here. I went and saw a couple of English mates, and I spoke to them today. And they were like, what is this? Explain this. Die ander kant, to us. And I'm like, yes, it sounds like it's that word, but it's not. It's Afrikaans, die ander kant, the other, the other side or the other corner, or however you want to say it. So, okay, Shams and Tommy, I now get it, and I will not say this side and that side anymore because we don't want to bring the politics into this. Paul, I look at it and listen. Hats off to Dorna. They made the correct decision in moving the main race from the Sunday to the Saturday. That was a really good decision there because we could have ultimately had a really bad weekend, especially for the spectators really missing out. But for the championship, yes, Jorge Martin's probably the biggest loser there because of what happened on the Saturday and not being able to regain any points, which he might have done in a sprint race on Sunday, depending on the weather and everything. But definitely the right decision to make. I know like Jack Miller and a couple of other riders were saying we could have potentially raced And it's not that kind of track because of the old schoolness of it. And as you said, the high average speed and stuff. It's not that kind of track you really want to take any risks at in weather. Moto 3 and Moto 2, kind of got away with it. 360 k an hour plus MotoGP bikes is pushing the envelope a little bit. So well done to Dorna and everyone involved there. I think they made the right decision. The racing was fantastic. Speaking of the racing, on Saturday, Ducati haven't won at Phillip Island, and I didn't know this. The commentators were saying it since Casey Stoner way back in, and I was like, no, man, surely we've had, and it hasn't. Alex Rins was last year, Marc Marquez the years before, Lorenzo, and then this year we have four Ducatis inside the top five, four Ducatis going for the victory, but with one leopard among the pigeons, our Mr. Brad Binder. But before we get to him, let's talk about Jorge Martin. And first of all, hello to Lisa Esmond. I see she's joined us. Lisa Esmond, who's Bjorn Esmond's mom and who helped create the Go Boca helmet for Brad Binder. So Lisa, and I know you did it with a friend of yours, a company in South Africa. Can't remember. Check out our Facebook page for the name, but well done on that initiative. But Paul, Jorge Martin. I don't want to call it a mistake because I never want to call it a mistake if the confidence is high and you know what, let's go for it. Let's put all the chips in and let's go for it. Not playing the conservative game, although sometimes you just have to, but let's go for it. Let's just throw it all and let's go for it. So you have to admire them for that. But at the same time, you have to look at them and go, right, were lessons not learned just a week before? Were lessons not learned? And as soon as he lined up on that grid, and the whole weekend, leading up to the weekend, the talk is, we spoke about it last week, tires. It's all about tire management. And because it's a fast track, the tires get abused and there Martin lines up with a soft rear. And I just went, I don't know if I want to pat this kid on the back for what, he just doesn't care and he just goes with his gut feeling and he goes, or, do you understand what you're throwing away here? And again, I know the team came out at the end and said, oh, it was our fault, we made him. I don't buy that. I think it's them just standing up for their rider. I think it was maybe both of their decisions, but both parties have again made a big mistake. Having said that, with 2 laps to go and you got a 2.4 second lead, I mean, I thought it was done and dusted, but it's amazing how he just fell off a cliff. But what I'm trying to get at here is just the fact that the inexperience of being a championship winning team and a championship winning rider at MotoGP level, again, coming to the forefront.
Yeah, well, that's twice shall we say, they've blundered. I agree with you. If the team are saying it was their decision, like you've been saying, they need to make adult decisions now. And I say that with all due respect to them. That's twice now that they had the championship. They did the opposite of what, as you mentioned, the professional team, the factory team that have been in this situation on numerous occasions, they did the opposite. For Saturday, Michelin had said, listen, guys, we recommend you don't run the soft tire. Piero Taramasso, who they interview every week before the race, says, we don't think it's a great idea because we know there's going to be drop-off on the soft tire. We just don't know how bad it's going to be. But we 100% know that it's going to be, it's not going to be 0.2 of a second a lap. So now this team say, well, if we can put him on that, why are they doing it? I don't know. I could understand if they were doing it to Marco Bezzecchi because he's trying to catch up points. But they're doing it to the guy who, over the last 5 races, without a shadow of the doubt, is the fastest guy on the grid. He is, besides last week where his qualifying was 6th position, other than that, he's been 1st, 2nd, or 3rd, everything that he's done, besides his little incident where he fell off. However, he's been the fastest guy. Now, is he lacking confidence that he's now saying, well, if I put the soft rear on against the better judgment of 99.9% of MotoGP and the guy from Michelin, and I build up a 4-second lead, no matter how badly it drops off, I'll be okay. And as the commentator said on Saturday afternoon, he did everything right, but the race was 1 lap too long. But that doesn't matter because in that lap, he lost over 1.5 seconds. And I mean, he's very good at defending. When those guys got onto him, man, his tire was, I don't even think it was as bad as bubblegum. He just couldn't turn the bike. Then he couldn't stand it up. Then they couldn't accelerate. and 4 of them blitzed past him. In fact, it was 2/3 of a lap. And in 3 laps, he saw a 4-second advantage evaporate. I do think it was a rookie error. And if it was the whole team needs to stand up and take the punishment, because now suddenly they back to over a race. I think it's 27 points he's behind. That's over a race. They had an idea Sunday's race wasn't going to take place. They kind of knew that. So, yeah, I think a real rookie error. If it was the team, by the team, whoever made that decision, they're losing the plot a little bit. And now they're going back to what we discussed 5 weeks ago. Martin saying, but it's not actually up to me to win this championship. Rubbish. It is up to you. And these 2 mistakes in 2 consecutive weekends have now put you seriously on the back foot. And your competitor, Mr. Bagnaia, has stepped up another level. He is racing like the true world champion, where halfway through the season, you and I were saying, look, he's looking a bit sketchy, very fast, but not like a world champion. Suddenly, he's definitely the guy to beat. Martin might be faster, but Bagnaia definitely has got his head in the right place, and the team are making the right calls.
I think that's the point. Bagnaia and the team are making the right calls, even when they put under pressure, as they were again this weekend. And this is what frustrates me with the Martin. So look at the bigger picture. Pecco didn't look comfortable at the pace that he was being forced to do by Martin and Brad and everyone else. Coming through Q1, made it into Q2. Hats off to Bagnaia. He recovered, managed to get on the front row. Brilliant. But I have no doubt that a Martin on a hard front and a medium rear would have won that race probably by half a second to a second anyway. So certainly would have been more in the mix to win the race. So I don't know what that move was all about. I don't know if it was a statement, or again, I think it's just that arrogance and that cockiness a little bit, coming out and saying, well, he seems like that kind of guy, like Martin. No, you can't jump in that pool head first. Oh yeah, watch me. He just seems like that kind of guy, which is an asset to have if you understand how to control it and manage it. I've said it all along with Darren. Darren Binder, I'm talking about. Darren's biggest asset is that I'll go for anything, balls to the wall. But it's also his biggest handbrake. And Brad's been able to kind of mesh both sides together into this, perfectly managed ecosystem that is Brad Binder, whereas Darren, still lies a little bit too much out, although he's making amends for it lately, becoming that more mature rider and being able to blend both together. But Martin seems to suffer a little bit too much from that. Like, okay, well, I need to, every lap needs to be a qualifying lap. I need to destroy everyone. I don't want to just beat everyone. I want to destroy everyone, which is a good mentality to have. It's great, but you've got to manage it. Even on that soft tire, right? You got the soft tire, but don't go for a 3.5 second lead after the first 8 laps. Try and save that tire a little bit more. There could have been different strategies, even if you have made the wrong decision, which is go with a softer tire, and they still got it wrong. So I just looked at that whole exercise and I went, okay, it's not like you said when he said, no, it's not our championship to win, it's theirs. Okay, well, you know what? Someone in that garage, your team manager or someone needs to pull you and say, no, we're in with a real chance here to make history for yourself, for the team, for our sponsors. Jorge Martin didn't just let himself down there. He let down sponsors, the team in a way. Like I said, we don't know who was fully involved and whose decision it was. I don't know if the Michelin guy within the team gets some kind of sanction for letting them make that decision, but there were a lot of bad decisions made. And we're going on at him like he made this terrible decision that's going to cost him the world. He missed out by 8 corners effectively. So, but MotoGP is about the finest margin. I could not believe when it was 2 laps to go and he still had just over 2 second lead. I thought, there's no ways. And Martin's going to manage this. Even if they get close to him, he's going to defend first gear, hold them up. But like you said, he was defenseless. It just shows that Michelin tire, when they say that drop off, it's literally a drop off. I mean, he had nothing. He couldn't stop the bike. He couldn't turn the bike. He couldn't accelerate. Ruined Brad's chances in a little way. But to finish off the Martin, there was blood in the water with Pecco and them, because Pecco managed his race on Saturday to perfection and got himself in second, and he celebrated. That was probably his best second place, or one of his best second places ever. But Martin and them just, I just can't believe it. I can't believe what actually happened on that day for them to make that mistake. There was blood in the water. Pecco and them, there was a little chink in the armor again, and just like a week before, they didn't take advantage of it.
Yeah, and they're going to rue that decision. He's now going from 8 points in front, which was not a huge lead, but it was the first time he had ever led the championship. One bad decision last weekend cost him 25 points. Bad decision this weekend, first place versus fifth place. I think it's another 8 or 9 points. Down the tubes, where, as we've discussed, decisions were made. It had nothing to do with a mechanical failure or him riding like an idiot. He was the fastest guy out there. Even last weekend, he was by far the fastest guy. Just strategy and team decisions, if it is a team decision, which I firmly believe it is. Now, I don't want to say hasn't gone their way. They've gone against the norm. And when you're doing this, like you and I have discussed, Rob, and I'm sure everyone watching the show will agree, when you're fighting for the championship and the margins are so fine and you're told don't do X, don't do X. Your championship rivals, and don't worry about what Pol Espargaro, Marc Marquez, Quartararo, Morbidelli are doing, because they're not in the championship. They got no chance to win it. So if they put soft rubber on when they're told not to, who cares? Marc Marquez was great for 6 or 8 laps. Pol was fair for a while. They're not in the championship. Even if they'd won the race, they ain't going to be winning the championship. His biggest rivals are the people that they need to be looking at. And it doesn't mean they can't make the decision. They can still make their own decisions. However, they need to look at what they're advised and told to do. He's got a championship to win. Like you say, there's sponsors and history that 2 weeks ago, I was going to say, man, this is a done deal. It's finished. And look what he's done in 2 weekends. He's put the ball back in Pecco's court, and I think he's made a big mistake because Pecco just suddenly is a different person. Yeah, like you've mentioned, Q1 into Q2 doesn't seem to faze him. I don't think he'll be thrilled about it. But come race day, Pecco's at his absolute best. I mean, that overtake through going into Miller Hairpin, he saw the gap. He passes 2 riders. He actually squirted the power on in the corner to make sure he got the place. He was, and that's all he had to do. One corner, put him 2 spots ahead of Martin going into the last third of the lap. That's exactly what he needed. He's now racing to win the championship, where 2 weeks ago, I think in the back of his mind, he'd kind of given up. And the tide has definitely turned now. Now all the pressure's back on Martin. And it looks like his team are showing they can't deal with this pressure.
Well, that's it. I think it is a little bit of both, a little bit of combination from both, but maybe a little bit more from the side of the team because, no matter what your rider says, surely the team should be able to, smack him or hold him tight and say, listen, we've got these Michelin guys who make these tires for us, telling us this, whether they've got away with it before and they have, and that just gives them the confidence to try it, then I understand that. But as I said, I think if you had put Martin on a medium, he would have probably won the race anyway. What concerns me as well is the confidence. Maybe the confidence of them sitting there going, which is now we've got to put the soft on if we want to be competitive. So, now, but this is what happens when a situation what happened the week before, you crash out and you've lost that advantage. Now now you start questioning things. Oh, geez, okay, maybe we must, or instead of just being on this, right, let's keep it simple. Let's stick to the basics in many ways. You always hear in football, cricket, and rugby, when things are going wrong, get back to basics. That's why there is a saying. And that's exactly what Pramac and Martin need to do now. I know Martin came out after the race and said, that's it. No more gambling with tires. We're going. And I do. I think he needs to trust himself more. In that race, if he had been hard, medium, in fact, if he had been hard, I think Martin is such a phenomenal rider at the moment that he can do anything. Yeah. He's got that bike set up. We heard Simon Crafar and the other commentators saying that he's got that bike set up. They don't make a tweak from track to track, and when you get yourself and your bike and your team in that frame of mind, like we have the perfect setup here. And that's what I'm saying, making these soft front at last week in Mandalika and then soft rear, you just feel unstoppable. Oh, we've got everything. We're unstoppable. But too much confidence breeds, mistakes. And we're seeing that now. So let them get a little bit back to basics and get this championship of theirs back on track, because they're still right in there, can still turn. There's still plenty of points up for grabs. But certainly, as you say, momentum has shifted back into favor of Factory Ducati and Pecco. I just love the comment here from Papa Swart. he made a side of himself. So the new C word is the S word. It seems like. There was
Yeah,
another
good
comment.
one.
Gordon De Beer, do you think Ducati could down-tune Martin's machines as well as funny settings? No, it's a straight shoot for the championship, between those two teams, between Martin and Becco and Pramac and Ducati. I don't think there will be any kind of funny thing going on there. Anything can happen with the championship. Just catching up on some comments here. Don't you think it's a Ducati decision to protect Pecco and the factory team? I know it sounds far-fetched, but anything is possible. Starsky, listen, all those kind of ways of thinking and comments, you could pull them out. It's very easy to pull this out and say, well, Pramac, it's factory backed by Ducati. Ducati have got their blue-eyed boy Pecco in the main team. Is it too far-fetched to think that Ducati and Gigi would go to Pramac and say, listen, we think the soft's going to be. I can understand you thinking that. I don't think that's happening. And even if it was, Pramac should have the balls. Martin should have the balls to stand up and say, bugger you, I'm in a championship hunt here. I'm going this route. So I can understand how that kind of thought process and pattern can come, but I don't think it's not. I know we worry about MotoGP going Formula One, but it's not that route. I don't think this championship is going to be won by decisions. Well, in many ways, it is going to be won by decisions made in the pits by teams, but not in the sense of what we are Ducati and our factory team is winning. Martin and Pramac aren't going to win this. We're going to do everything. I don't think it's like that at all, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't think so either. And I think, I know definitely last year, Ducati came out and said, you guys can race for the championship, but the front riders just don't take each other out. Have a fair race, give it horns, but if you're racing for the championship, don't take each other out. So that was kind of, I think they were quite fair. And they obviously, I'm going to believe, had the same outlook for this year, because no doubt Ducati is going to win the championship. And in fact, as we've discussed, I think it is only going to be between Martin and Bagnaia, because Bezzecchi is a little bit too far behind. But I can't see Ducati interfering at all, and certainly not recommending, take the soft tire, we know it'll be better. They've got loads of data, all the teams, so they'll know exactly what's going on. I think, if anything, the decision would come from Michelin as to what they recommend. Doesn't mean you have to do it, but they certainly would recommend. So I can't see there being any interference from Ducati, from the top management. They might just sit the riders down, a la Bagnaia and Martin, and say, guys, we're getting to the pointy end of this championship. Race as hard as you want, but please try not to take one another out. And I think when they say those comments, they'll be looking George Martin in the eye more than they'll be looking Pecco in the eye when they say that.
And they've got a Marc Marquez thrown into the mix next year on one of their bikes as well. Ashley Soren from 300 Plus saying hello, missing you in SA, brother. I'm Messian, missing you all as well. Hope you're all doing well. I see your business is thriving. Check out the 300 Plus Facebook page, YouTube channel. Just motorcycle porn of note. That's the best way to describe it. It always feels funny saying that word, but it's the best way to describe it. Before we get on to Eugene's comments about Brad and Zarko, I just want to finish off with Pecco Bagnaia quickly. You've kind of just said everything that needs to be said. The champions come out the last two race meetings. People said, what was the big difference between the Saturday sprint race in Mandalika to the Sunday where he was able to compete and Saturday not? Again, this was always going to be the question at the start of the season, certainly for me, is, right, how much do riders commit to a sprint race versus a main race? And it was very evident. Pecco Bagnaia showcased it perfectly last weekend. We all know what happened with the qualifying. He didn't make it into Q2 and he had to start wherever he did, 13th or wherever he was. So how much do you commit in a sprint race where you've got half of the points available and you've got the main race on Sunday with all the points? And Pecco highlighted it. Well, yes, he could have maybe committed a little bit more, but that's not the place to commit. Your main race is where you commit, and he did it to perfection in Mandalika in the main race. Coming from the back of the grid was more aggressive, better passes, made it perfect. Coming into Phillip Island again, we saw this Q1 situation. Yeah, and again, just wasn't looking comfortable. I was watching him in the qualifying, the practices, and I was like, geez, what is there a bit of doubt in Pecco? Because he just seems to be, and have they now found themselves in the spot where they had this bike with a sweet spot, and now after the crash, in Catalonia, where it was a little bit of a mystery and you get run over, and now the panic of the championship, again, this is when the question marks come in. Now you start doubting yourself. Teams start doubting ourselves. Are we giving in the right package? Oh, let's go 3 turns instead of 2, and all these kind of parameters come into play. But then Pecco and his team, let's not take it away from the team, they bring it together and they just go, right, lads, let's calm down, back to basics. We know this setup works. We know this works. Let's go there. Let's consolidate and let's make this work. And Pecco pulled it off again this weekend in Phillip Island. Brought his A game in Q1, made it into Q2, put it on the front row. Fantastic job. Found time out of nowhere, and he did all by himself. He wasn't being tagged. He was the one being tagged. I'm still not a huge fan of this Moto3 in MotoGP style of all these bikes just cruising along, and it irritates me no end, especially at a fast track like Phillip Island. It scares the hell out of me. But then Pecco goes and pulls it off in the race. And again, Paul, you mentioned, I have to take my hat off to Pecco. The racecraft of that move on the last lap. He knew in heading into that last lap, going 300 million Ks an hour, knee down, elbow down, Pecco Bagnaia heading into that Miller hairpin still has the thought process, the calmness to go, Martin's suffering here. He's going to go a little bit defensive. Zarco's going to shove it on his inside. I'm going to go to the left, line up this move that in a situation, if they go slightly wide, which they will if Zarco's on his inside. And now he's worked all this out within split seconds. He's made these decisions. He knows that Zarco's going to go in. Martin's not going to have the tire to turn or the space to turn in. He's going to let go of that brake, as you said, give it a squirt and put himself in that position. And knowing the risk coming behind him that a Di Antonio and a Brad are potentially there to wipe him out. But he made that decision. He took that risk. And it was one of the best moves I've seen in motorcycle racing. I mean, I cast my mind back to a couple of years ago in World Superbikes, Laverty going around the outside of Marco Melandri in the final turn at Jerez. It was that kind of move, but with so much more on the line. He could have easily just backed it off and said, right, I'll get Martin in the next turn or the next turn because his tire's gone. And he just went. I just couldn't help but applaud Pecco Bagnaia for that move and the way he's going about this championship and the way he's not giving up in his racecraft. It was just spectacular to see.
Well, exactly that. He's racing like a true world champion. I mean, he's world champion, so he's a true world champion. But suddenly he went through a bit of a lull, and I think he was letting Martin get to him. Then everything changed last weekend with Martin crashing and him coming from 13th or 14th on the grid and winning the race, which, let's be quite honest, none of us would have thought that's going to happen. Now, suddenly he gets this opportunity. And I mean, we've watched MotoGP and motorcycle racing for many years. How often do you see it in a turn where you actually see a guy accelerate to make a place? If he had just carried some speed, he would have been a half a wheel length ahead, but he jumped ahead. Because I think exactly what you say, he had lined the whole thing up. In his head, he was trying to win this race. He thought, well, if Zarco pushes Martin wide and they both run wide, he can do a 2-for-1 deal here. Fortunately for Zarco, he was able to just push Martin maybe 3 or 4 centimeters wide, which pushed him a little bit out, but it gave Bagnaia the perfect opportunity. And I mean, if you watch the last 3 laps of the race, Bagnaia wasn't comfortably in the hunt for the win or for even second, because then Brad was still second. He had been passed by Di Antonio. He had passed him back. He certainly wasn't making the pace to say that he got that position. Zarco came from 5th past them all. But when the chips were down and he knew this is do or die, he put that move. I think it was a very fair move. There was nothing untoward about it, but it was to say, boys, you're playing with the world champion. Don't play with me. And he's really, the last couple of weeks, he's impressed me. I still would like to see Martin win the championship just because he's that never give up. He's taken chances. He's unexpected, but I don't know if it's going to happen now. And I was almost ready to say it's done. But Bagnaia, certainly the last couple of weekends, undoubtedly the best rider on the track in terms of what's at stake. Yes, Zarco won the race, and all credit, and I'm fantastically happy for him. But in terms of the championship, Bagnaia was the winner by miles.
Yeah, I love the racing this weekend because there were so many. I mean, Miller shoved it on the inside of Pecco. Marquez was shoving it all. Mark Marquez was shoving it everywhere. DG was in the race. It was just great to see. And you speak about that move with Pecco. It was great to see the riders almost riding a little bit more with freedom. Not worrying so much about penalties. You could see that made the whole spectacle better because there wasn't this. This cloud over them of don't pass or we're going to get taken out or race direction. It just really was a fantastic race Saturday. It's a pity the sprint race didn't happen in the same kind of conditions. I think a sprint race at Phillip Island. And Martin had proven on the Saturday that, and that's what I was so keen to see, how many riders, if the sprint rate did happen in the dry, how many would go with the soft? Because Martin proved that, right, for 15 laps, you can use the soft.
You could,
and that would have just would have been the most epic race ever because I think Miller would have been better. I think Di Antonio would have been better. I think Bastianini could have been potentially better. Maybe the Aprilias. It just would have been a whole different outcome, but it didn't happen anyway. Pecco Bagnaia, fabulous. We can finish on him now. Let's move on to Brad before we get into Zarco. And a couple of people have made comments here. Mickey Teal, Zarco is off my grandson's Christmas list. Laugh out loud. But Swart said a little bit of payback from Zarco on Brad with the Go Boca and the French and the Boca, knowing what happened with the rugby, that losing out there by 1 point to the Boca. And a couple of guys, Colin Kane, also saying, it's a pity Brad left the door open. And it's such a tough one because, again, put yourself in Brad's shoes now. When Brad dropped off, when he dropped behind DG, and then I thought, tires. Then when he started coming, you went, this is the Sunday man doing his thing on a Saturday. This is it. And when he got up into that second, I thought, right, he's pulling the plug here. And if anyone's going to catch Martin, it's going to be Brad, and he's got to eke out that. And unfortunately, what happened is Brad, was the carrot for the Zarco, the Di Antonio, and the Bagnaia in the end. And Wayne Taylor Binder got outbinded by Zarco. That's exactly what happened. But Brad knew that, and he said he knew Martin's tire was dropping, but he still had 3 seconds to make up with 3 laps to go or whatever it was. So he couldn't go defensive minded because he was finding time. So, he got into second, obviously felt like he had the pace to go, but he needed to use those wide swooping lines to get that pace to catch Martin. So, and Brad's one of the latest breakers in MotoGP. So he's got the confidence of, I'm going into this Miller hairpin. I'm going to back, I'm going to do my thing. I'm going to go nice and wide and drive out and go. What he wasn't expecting and what I wasn't expecting, and I think a lot of people weren't expecting, was a Zarco to shove it on the inside. And look, Zarco went in there too hot. They were both never going to make the corner the way you should have. And 2 things happened. I fell off the couch when it happened at whatever it was, 5 or 6 in the morning. I was screaming at the TV without screaming because the kids were still sleeping. And so I was like, as a Binder fan, I was screaming at Zarco because 2 things happened. He pushed Brad wide, effectively ruined Brad's chances of winning the race and being on the podium. And the second thing I was worried about was, guys, why are you doing this when you have a chance to catch Martin? This is not helping. This is not helping anyone's situation. Zarco, you idiot, sit behind Brad and he will take you to Martin. And then on the last lap, decide. Zarco obviously had other plans. And you can understand it from Zarco's point of view. He was going, I feel good, yeah. Bike feels good. My first MotoGP win is 3 laps up the road there. And I can see Martin. I don't want to hang around here. I don't want to stick behind a Brad who I know and probably trust has got the pace. But I'm going. And he pulled it. And it frustrated me so much. With my Brad Binder fan cap on, I went, Zarco, you bastard, I hate you, just like you're off my Christmas list. And then from a journalist or a fan point of view, I went, yes, what a move. Because at the same time, it was a chess move in many ways. He knew that Brad was the danger man going into those last couple of laps. And he kind of took him off the chess, out of the game in a way. I've got to run this guy out. I can deal with everyone else. I don't want to deal with a Brad Binder on the last lap. Yes, it ruins Brad's race. Yes, Brad would have potentially won that race. But, again, brilliant racecraft by Zarco. So just touch on on how you saw the whole thing with Brad play out before we get into Zarko. It was heartbreaking because the race win was there for Brad and KTM and being the only KTM amongst those four Ducatis, as I said, the leopard amongst the pigeons, overriding the KTM's ability while his teammate was 7th, 15 seconds or whatever it was back. It was like, this is the one that Brad looks forward to the most. The writing was on the wall, and then it just gets kicked in the face by a flying Frenchman.
Yeah, I think he definitely got Brad bunded by Johann Zarco, which is very strange for Brad. He's normally, he just doesn't seem to be the aggressive Brad we've seen in the past. And when I say aggressive, he wasn't ugly aggressive. He wasn't bash you out the way aggressive. He was just, I would say, more forceful. When he wanted to make a pass, last week with Oliveira, he was aggressive. But as we discussed, I think he had got to a point where he had had enough of being blocked and, where normally he makes one pass, he makes it count, and he's gone. And on Saturday, that's exactly what happened to him. A little bit forceful, which is Zarco's style. Won't be the first time he's done it. Certainly won't be the last. What I thought happened with Zarco, he could feel how good his bike was. And he even said in the interview, or if it was on one of the post-race interviews, every lap going into the last 10, so 10, 9, 8, his bike, he said it just felt better and better and better. So what that does, it gives him so much confidence. At the same time, he's closed 4 tenths, 3 tenths, 2 tenths, and he's on Brad. He knows he can't wait. Brad is the danger man, 100%. He also knows that he's past Bagnaia, but Bagnaia's coming back. I think the Gian Antonio in the mix there, they would have said, he's an unknown quantity, so let's make sure he's behind us. We've never raced him for a first, second, third in MotoGP. We don't know what he's going to do. Is he going to take 3 of us out? Is he going to dive bomb us? Is he going to sit at the back? We got no idea. So put him out the equation as well. And I think that might have also factored into Zarco's reckoning. One thing I don't believe he thought of until the last lap was that he could win the race. I think what he was thinking possibly was, I've got a great second lined up now. It was still a lap and a half or 2 laps before Martin started suffering badly. And suddenly they were putting points into Bagnaia again as a team. So like one of the commentators said, is he now going to be the wingman to Martin? Suddenly he sees his teammate dropping over half a second a lap. And that's when I think he said, okay, now I'm all in. 120 races. I wrote it down. 2,533 days since his last backflip. So, and I said it last time we spoke. I said, I'd love to see him win, but I even said, I don't know if it's going to happen. Well, I'm so happy for him. And he's not my favorite rider, but I think a guy who's been there so consistently. And I mean, we even chatted last week saying he's a bit off the boil. Well, yes, he proved us wrong. So good, well done to him, but he definitely, he pulled a move on Brad that upset Brad's race hectically. I mean, and we're talking 2-3 tenths of a second, but he was in it for a good result and it paid off for him. So all credit to him.
It was, listen, it was a masterpiece. As you said, when he also put that move in, you could see the whole Pramac team celebrate because they were like, also, right, this kind of move, holding everyone up is just giving Martin that, that another little couple of tens to hold on to that lead. And it must have been hard for Zarco coming into that final lap, getting across the line and getting into turn 1 pretty much on the back of Martin and going, right, now what do I do here? Yes, I'm leaving the team. I'm leaving Ducati. I'm going to Honda. Pastures News, great. But there's a MotoGP win at the taking for you. And the commentator summed it up perfectly. Well, if he doesn't take it, Bagnaia, Brad, Antonio, they will. So Zarco did the right thing. I know I had 1 or 2 people, and I saw 1 or 2 comments saying, should Zarco have made that move? The team player. No. Martin and the team put themselves in that situation, and it wasn't up to Zarco to sacrifice his race and his first win because of their bad decisions. And I think, and look, hats off to Martin. He was there at the end. He celebrated with Zarco. Martin's a big enough boy to, and at no point did, and again, I must commend Martin, at no point did he throw his toys at the cot or did he go in the pits and throw gloves, and he sat there and, took it on the chin, and he Martin has been and looks like that kind of personality that could throw his toys out the cotton net, but he actually looked really mature the last couple of races, despite everything. Even the way he handled the Mandalika crash, he said, "You know what? I haven't made a mistake in a long time. I've made a mistake now. Take it." And he's handled it well. He really has handled it well. But we need to start seeing these decisions made right now. A couple of really good comments here regarding Zarco and from Marius Buerta. I love it. And this is what made this win so important, because if Zarco didn't get the win this year on a Ducati, with all due respect, it's not going to happen next year on an LCR unless there's a hectic rain race at like Essen or something, and four guys fall, and it's going to be like a real special kind of win. But I'm so glad Zarco got it, because it was his last opportunity. Whether he can win another one before the end of the year, in my experience with these kind of guys like Zarco, and I'm not saying this is the way, but I'm just saying from what I've seen in past, with there's been these one-hit wonders in a way in MotoGP. I'm not saying Zarco is going to be, but that they've carried this burden on their shoulders for so long that when it's off, it's off. It's kind of like job done in a way. And whether Zarco is going to have that same kind of motivation to go out every race weekend and go for the win, I don't know anymore. Or if it's, what happens. If I finish fourth, I'm happy. So I don't know. Zarco deserved to be called a MotoGP race winner. I think it was brilliant to see the backflip. I've wanted to see it, and the way he won it made it more special. It wasn't a race that was handed to him. It wasn't a race that was given to him. It wasn't that 3 or 4 of the best riders crashed and he won it. He was the best rider out of that entire field. All top 22 riders other than Alex Rins were present. They were all on the grid, and Zarco went and won the race. So I'm very happy for him. As I said, it could not have been easy being put in that decision-making process of my championship teammate ahead of me. I'm leaving the team. What do I do? I think he made the right decision, and it was a fantastic win. The move on Brad, harsh but absolutely fair. Brilliant race mood. As I said, it eliminated the guy that was going to be his biggest threat on the last lap, which was Brad, and picked up a brilliant win. Little Big Media Co says, I feel Brad pulled the pin about 2 or 3 laps too late. Waiting until he got the remap message from the box was too late. It was a strange one from Brad, because he did kind of fall into the clutches of those guys, and then I thought, oh God, what's happening here? Is it tire management, or is it tires going? Because then he did seem to have a second win and go again. And yeah, I can understand what Little Big's saying, is that he did maybe leave it a bit too late, which left him vulnerable to the Zarco move. And that it was such a tricky situation, because I found myself sitting there going, well, what do they do? Are they going to have enough tire to catch Martin? Is Martin's drop coming? I can't see this drop coming that they're talking about. I can't see Martin throwing away a 3-second lead. I don't care how much it drops off, but it did. So it was a lot to take on board. And the guy who handled it and managed it the best was Zarco and Pecco Bagnaia.
And also just looking at the result and Zarco and his win, and everyone being stoked for him, and every rider coming and congratulating him, he clearly deserved it. Mm-hmm. On the track, he sees what's going on. They can see how quickly they catch in Martin. And there's no ways he thinks to himself, I wonder if George is making mistakes, or am I just going that much better? He knew his teammate was on the soft tire. So once he caught him, there was no thought, what should I do? He knew, I've caught him so quickly, there must be a problem. He might not have known it was tires. He certainly would have presumed that's what it was. His thought process was never anything but, it's someone in the way going half a second slower than me. I've got to get past. In fact, it was probably 0.8 of a second slower. So he didn't, I don't believe, for 1 second thought about the team game. That closed so dramatically on him that he said, well, this is my chance to win. I also want to relate him to Danilo Petrucci. Remember when Petrucci was in the factory team? He had never won a race. Then he won at Mugello. He won another 2 races that season. I think he finished his win tally in MotoGP was 3. So I'm hoping Zarco can replicate that. Mm-hmm. I don't believe it's going to happen, though, because the next 4 race meetings, so 8 races, I think we're going to see a different George Martin making better decisions. Pecco's going to be a little bit more ruthless than we've seen him in the past. And I fully concur with what you're saying. On the Honda next year, he might get lucky at Kota like Alex Rins. And lucky, I mean, the bike, just the package works there for whatever reason and generally nowhere else, or he's going to need extreme weather conditions. I can't see it happening. So I'm with you on that, but I certainly think his thought process, once he saw how quickly they caught Jorge Martin in the last lap, was, he's just going to get in the way. We've got to get past him as quickly as we can, because if I don't do it, we know the results. It's going to be someone else. But he certainly, that's all of them. And I say all of them. Some of them may be less so. Did Gian Antonio's racecraft? We haven't seen it at the front. He rode like an absolute star. But Zarco's been there, 13 or 14 second places, Moto2 world champion, the only rider to defend that. He knows how to win. So put him in that situation, and it's instinct. He doesn't actually, it just happens, and suddenly he's in front and he wins, and he makes no mistakes. So all credit to him, and I think very well deserved. So yeah, nice to see, but I agree with you. I don't think, unless it happens this year, I don't see it happening again.
And we said in last week's show, Phillip Island is that kind of track that throws up these surprises and lets the likes of Zarco and DJ Antonio be in the mix, whereas other tracks, they'll just fall off the pace. And that's the beauty of Phillip Island. And it came to the forefront again this race meeting. Mart van Jaarsveld, very good point here. I love this comment from Mart. BB33 helped develop KTM in Moto3, then Moto2. And between him and Danny, they're developing the MotoGP bike. But I think he also started developing himself to run up in the front consistently. He is aggressive, but much more mature and thinking about the race. And I agree fully with Mark's comments there, is that Brad did have to mature himself as a MotoGP rider, as a front runner in MotoGP. There's a big difference between that mid-pack and the front runner in MotoGP. It's not worlds apart, but there is a difference. And, looking at this race again just highlights the fact to me, judging where Jack was at a track that he loves and knows his home fans, and the next, Paul Espargaro and Augusto, who had terrible races, Augusto crashing, Paul making, the soft. Paul, you put the soft tire on, great. That's what I want Paul and those kind of riders to do. Get that data, try those things out, let Brad and then go for the solid, this works, let's go for it. Paul, got nothing to lose, put a soft on, let's go for it. But what it showcased with Brad was being amongst those Ducatis is, and we forget this, Brad is in many ways putting the KTM where it shouldn't be still. Yes, we're all thinking KTM's on it now, and it's still not. It's still 2-3% behind the Ducati. And it was highlighted again this weekend. And Brad is still having to ride it 2-3% harder or override. They're all riding at 110%, that top five. But Brad was running at 112% to keep himself there and keep himself in the mix compared to the Ducati machines. And this is something that Marc Marquez is going to find out next year, I think, straight away, is that, I don't have to ride this Ducati like I did the Honda at 110 million% every single corner, every single lap, just to try and keep myself there. The Ducati gives you that little bit of freedom to kind of, be off in places, and you can make up in other places and ride a little bit more within yourself. And this is where I don't want us to get too over glorified or too over exuberant about where Brad and KTM are. I think we do need to focus on a little bit more Jack realistically and where they are. I think that's still a little bit further up because Jack's still learning the process. And, Jack, I think, has had a lot go on this season, made the big move to KTM, recently married, just had his baby. There's a lot going on for Jack in his life. I think next year we're going to see a little bit more calm, collected, relaxed, consistent Jack, and then we'll judge the performances. I've said that the whole season. But with Brad and KTM, it still looks like they're just not there. And Brad's still overriding that KTM to keep himself there. And this is where I hope Brad and KTM can find that 2% extra. And I think they will with this carbon chassis. Still very early days. Yeah. I mean, Brad just at KTM plugged it in at Japan 3 race meetings ago, and they're already proving in Japan and in Mandalika, and now there's a lot there. There really is a lot coming from that. I think Sepang's going to be a good exercise for them. Thailand's a question mark because of weather and that again. I think Sepang's going to be good. I think Valencia is going to be really good for that carbon chassis. Brad's always been fast at KTM, no matter at Valencia, no matter what. That carbon chassis and the agility is going to help him at Valencia. But kind of my thought process here, just to end off, is Brad's overriding that KTM. So yeah, we can say, oh, you should have closed the door more on that. Brad's got to ride that KTM. He's got to take those swooping lines. He can't skimp on corners, if you know what I mean, because if he skimps, he loses a lot of time to the KTMs.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to disagree with you about. First of all, my opinion, I don't think Jack, how much more time does he need? He's had 25, how many races? 30 races to adapt. Yes, I understand it's a learning process. My opinion, he's certainly, I think, the best guy they could have on the bike for what they've got. He's doing a great job, I presume, behind the scenes, helping develop things. I'm not impressed by him, me personally. Blows hot and cold. Fair weekend this weekend. I mean, it's his home track. He knows the track. He was consistent. Last week, the weeks before, he's been going from good, reasonable starts to mid-pack to, so that's my opinion. So I'm not comfortable with Jack. I don't know if we're going to see much more out of him. I don't believe we are. I think next year, and I understand, just got married, just had a baby, personal life, was never sure of contracts. Now he's got the 2-year deal. Wasn't sure if he was going to get booted out for Pedro Acosta. Yes, I understand all these technicalities and pressure, but that weight of expectation, he struggles to deal with it. Brad Binder, on the other hand, and this is also, I'm going to sort of disagree with you. I think Brad carries that weight of expectation like nothing. He puts it on his shoulders, sticks it in his suit when he zips it up, and he just deals with it like he's going out to try and win a MotoGP race. He is the complete package. I agree with you that bike is not a Ducati, but Brad Binder gives you everything you'd want as a MotoGP rider. He never looks flustered. He never, no matter how his qualifying goes, he never comes into the garage a la Aleix Espargaro shouting and screaming. He just seems to me that, as I say, that weight of expectation to perform, he's grown into that role. And I think he grew into that role actually in Moto2. That when he had that season where first year not great, second year, I mean, what did he close? A 65-point gap on Alex Marquez to finish 5 points behind, won the last 3 or 4 races. He's grown into that position. He is a world champion in his head. They unfortunately don't have the package for him to win. But as a rider, Brad is, I agree with you, if you say he's riding 2, 3, 5% better than the rest of them, I think you underplaying that, Rob. That guy is, I really do believe that. But the bike, and that's where I've highlighted the same with Mark. Take Mark Marquez out of the equation. Look where the next Honda is, if you think the Honda's not too bad. Take Brad out of the equation. Look where the next KTM gas is. They're nowhere. So that's where you see how good these fronts, and probably the same with Yamaha. But Brad, to me, he is the complete package. As I'm going to say, Pecco Bagnaia, exactly the same. Pecco, maybe a little bit of Italian comes out now and again. When he doesn't have a great Friday morning practice one, he can get a little bit flustered. But Brad, to me, complete package in everything. When he's interviewed, when they show him in the pits, good or bad result, he's never, and maybe I'm no psychologist. Is it a good thing to have those temper tantrums? Throw your helmet, chuck your gloves, jump up and down and get rid of the frustration? I don't know. But Brad, to me, the complete package, what you'd want. Man, I would love to have seen him on a Ducati. I really would, purely to be able to say, well, there you can see how talented he actually is. Because I think there's still 1 or 2 people who doubt how good he is.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight something. Years ago, and if I ever bumped into him personally, I'm going to say something, but that's not going to happen. Carlo Pernat, who I think is Bagnaia's manager, when Brad moved to MotoGP, he said, this guy doesn't deserve a ride in MotoGP. And I don't know if you ever read or heard that comment, Rob. I was blown away. This is a oak who's supposed to know MotoGP. Boy, if anyone deserves their ride in MotoGP, it's Brad Binder.
I couldn't agree with you more. But the fact that you disagreed with me, Paul, is, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last time you'll see Paul ever on the show.
Rewind.
Yeah. You know what? I agree with you, and I understand the Jack argument. I do, because I do find myself sitting there when I see him in those positions, and I do go, Jack's better than this. He's better than this, and he should be doing better. Then I kind of, I don't know if it's from the riding point of view or the fact that, I do know him a little bit more personally because I've been to the racetracks, and he's just, very good guy to me, and he's just very friendly with me, and he's become a guy that I would call a friend. So I don't know if I have that different outlook, but certainly when people go on and say Jack's not performing, I can understand why, and I can understand why people defend him. And so I'm on the edge of the fence there. And in terms of Brad, I agree with you perfectly. There is, and I love that the comment about he zips it up and he's suit and he just takes it all in, because that's exactly what he does, and how he handles it afterwards. And he's been through so much. It hasn't been an easy introduction into MotoGP. It was brilliant that he won that first, after 3 race meetings in MotoGP, won at Bruno. Hey, it was brilliant, but it was actually a bad thing at the same time, because it kind of overshadowed a lot of problems, and it put them on a pedestal that they weren't ready for, Brad or KTM, and it put a lot of pressure on, and he went through a lot of dark times. People don't realize the dark times that he went through in that grid, from all that people saying he's not good enough, KTM is not good enough, he should leave, should go back here. He wasn't producing results at a stage. So to put all that behind him and to be where he is now, and I agree with you. We get a lot of comments on our YouTube channel from all around the world, from diehard South African Binder fans and from other people that just like watching a MotoGP talk show, and they say, "Yeah, we understand that you're South African and you're a bit biased, but you guys do overplay Brad quite a bit. He's not one of the best in the world. He's a good rider, but and it's hard for me to, when I got my Brad cap on, to not comment there and say, what the hell are you talking about? How much does the guy need to prove to you on that? You put anyone else on that bike, as Jack has kind of proven, and they're not going to get the same results as Brad is. They're just not. But at the same time, he hasn't finished top 3 in a MotoGP World Championship. He hasn't really put in a good MotoGP challenge yet. But as you just highlighted, I think it's more down to the fact that, I don't want to say he's been let down by KTM and his team, but they haven't been able to give him the tools to really go for it. They're starting to now, and I hope next year they can find that 2% or that 3% that they're missing with this, carbon chassis, and that to get themselves closer to Ducati every single race meeting. I still think that Ducati, with all the data from all the different riders at all the race circuits, is just such a dynamic and agile and kind of just can take anything on kind of machine, whereas the KTM might be a little bit more one directional, and Brad's got to force it out of that one direction and put it in another direction. But there's no doubt that Brad is, we talk about Alessio Spargaro as the captain of Aprilia. Brad Binder is the captain of KTM, and KTM want him as their captain, and Jack will tell you that Brad's the captain, and Jack wants him to be the captain because he's leading them in the right direction. Jack's going to have his input there. So I just hope that, as you said, KTM can just kind of find that little bit extra to help him out. And a couple of guys have commented here, Paul, and agreed with you. Some have agreed, some haven't necessarily, in terms of Brad's looking a little bit not as aggressive as he was. And I know Courtney, who's obviously Brad's fiancée, soon to be wife, commented last week in saying, these riders are having to think a lot more about penalties and stuff. And it certainly has seemed to have played on Brad's mind a bit more compared to some other riders. Brad certainly does seem to be and fully justified, because there's so much on the line here now. You don't want to ruin your race. Your race can be ruined by a move that you think is perfectly good, and probably in the world of racing is perfectly good, but to the stewards isn't. And you get a long lap penalty, and you go from MotoGP is covered by seconds now. You go 3-second long lap penalty takes you from in the podium mix or the win mix to dicing potentially for top 10s now. So there's a lot on the line there. And Brad coming into Australia certainly was hit a little bit by his mistakes, let's call them, at Mandalika against Marini and Oliveira. So
yeah. And it has to play on your mind, Rob, because the penalties they're a little bit haphazard at the moment. Something where we think there's going to be a penalty, nothing. Something where you think, oh, well, that's okay. Suddenly the guys are getting penalties. So I definitely think that's a problem. Just going back to the KTM story for half a second, look at their track record. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Paul walked out of KTM to go to Honda thinking it was an improvement. Johan Zarco lasted how long? 4 months, 5 months. And he said, I'm done with this. Who's the only guy who stuck it out or stuck it out consistently? So I think credit has to be given to Brad. I wholly believe that the package is not capable of winning the World Championship. You have to be good. If there's 21 races in the year, you probably have to be good being top 5 for 16 or 17 of those rounds. Your leeway nowadays is marginal. You can't have 2 off weekends and be in the hunt for the championship. Let's use Maverick as an example. 3-4 races ago, he was the talk of the town. He's going to win. Where was he this last weekend? I joke about it, between him and Nakagami. You actually don't even know they were at the race on the weekend. And I mean, we've highlighted it, Rob. These are the best of the best. That margin is minuscule. So the margin between the KTM and the Ducati, we're not talking about 1 million miles away. They are 0.2 of a second away. But over 25 laps, that equates to 3 seconds. You don't win if you're 3 seconds behind. So it's a very difficult one. I do believe the adapting to this new carbon chassis, so they'll know by the end of this season if they're going in the right direction. At least then that'll be one scenario they can put to bed. Either they're going in the right direction and they pursue it, or it's not and they move on to something else. But I think that's been a big advantage or big change for them. Next year, we've got to hope 2%, because I don't see Ducati finding 2%. What Ducati are finding is Marc Marquez, which, looking at the Gian Antonio is my example, who I said last week, I think that he's just getting better and better and better. But still, on this past weekend, he was fantastic, but he's on a Ducati, so we know how good the bike is. So I don't know. It's a very difficult one. A lot of people probably were disappointed when Brad re-signed for another 2 years instead of looking at the option to go to Ducati. But there's also, he's a South African. He's got loyalty built into him.
Yeah.
So I think that can be a good trait, but it can also be a bad trait. I think for Brad, it's a very good trait because he's moving the project forward. The disappointing thing might be that in 2 or 3 seasons' time, when he's kind of getting towards the end of his career, the Pedro Acostas might be the world champion on a bike that Brad has developed. But that's a choice he's made. He's sticking with it and he's 100% committed, which is better than being 98% committed. So, all credit to him. And people don't understand. For anyone who doubts how good he is, as I say, just go look at where the next KTM is. Consistently. Don't look at one race. Look at it over a championship. I mean, he's 4th in the world championship. He was 6th last year. He's just got better and better. And he's up against a bike that is so dominant, which makes his job 20% harder than if he was up against the Hondas and the Yamahas,
I was just about to say that Little Big Media Co says here again, seems like Brad's lacking some mongrel lately. Remember when he was a good Moto3 rider and then he got put at the back of the grid in that race? He needed that fire to realize his potential. And it does seem that way. And you can sit on the outside and go, oh, Brad's lacking a bit of aggression and. But we do forget that he's going in this race. Let's just use this race for example. He's going up against 4 Ducatis, 4 of the best riders on the best motorcycle racing's ever seen, the most adaptable motorcycle that's ever been seen.
And after 27 laps, he finished 0.8 of a second behind.
And that was
Yeah, exactly. It's not like he's finishing, I'll tell you now, Miller, 9.5 seconds, versus 0.8 of a second. You blink your eyes twice, that's 0.8 of a second.
Yeah.
It's not like he was struggling in 4th place. Let's be quite honest about it.
No, that's what I said. From the outside, it's easy to look and say this and this and this, but we do forget of the hurdles that he's had to jump over and the obstacles he's had in front of him. At the moment, he's just got this layer of Ducati's obstacles, which the Aprilias, sort out every now and then. The Hondas are nowhere near the Yamahas, and these are, those are the big men. These are big players. And Brad and this KTM, the still relatively new package in terms of years compared to the others, are still finding their way. And after what Brad came in 2020, so 4 seasons effectively, call it now.
Yeah.
Okay, to be 4th in the World Championship with mistakes having been made from KTM side and Brad's side this season, which would have put them even closer. If you look at the big picture, as you said, if you look at the bigger picture and you really dissect it, Brad's a superhero. And this is why KTM throw the checkbook at him, give him the keys to the building, will not let him go. I don't think they will ever let that kid go. Pedro Costa coming into the team next year, I think is fantastic. It's going to bring, a bit more aggression in. It's going to bring a bit more data in. It's going to bring a different dynamic in. I think Pedro is going to ride the bike potentially in a different way, just to highlight, as Jack did at the beginning of this year, oh, well, try this, maybe ride it like this, maybe let go of the brakes a little bit earlier, or maybe try to do this gear ratio. I think he's going to bring a little bit of, he's going to bring something. Pedro Acosta, and the talent that is Pedro Acosta, is going to bring something to that exercise. A lot more than I think, no disrespect to them, Augusto, certainly Apollo Spargo, where he is in his career. Jack, you cannot doubt, has brought a lot to the package. Whether they've just hit a brick wall now or it's just Jack, we don't know. But certainly I'm excited at the Pedro Acosta coming into KTM next year. I think it's going to be him having a Pedro and a Brad, and that those fiery attitudes, because in a way, Pedro reminds me a little bit of Brad coming through. There's a little bit more to Pedro in other ways and more to Brad in other ways, but it's a good recipe there that KTM have got heading into next year's championship. So that's just an exciting exercise. Finish.
Rob, I think a lot of people also forget this KTM story in MotoGP is only 8 seasons old.
Yeah.
KTM have been in the championship, for a heck of a long time. Yes, they saw big changes once Gigi came across to them, which, for people who don't know, he was poached from Aprilia. And he certainly made the difference. But once again, he was there from 2014. It's taken them, let's give them until 2021, where they really started dominating. So it's 7 seasons worth of growth. So KTM are getting to that point now. And that's Ducati changing, I'm going to say one person. Obviously, that's the main change. But they've been in the championship for many years. KTM were a brand new package. They took them 3 or 4 years to find their feet. Now they've settled down. It seems like they've got the right people in the right positions. They can only go forward. They seem to be a company that when the riders ask for things to be done, a la carbon fiber chassis or whatever it is, those changes are made, and they're made fairly quickly. So there's no doubt the dynamic is there, but it's a time game because of the restrictions throughout the season. You can't just arrive with 50 things to try. You can't bring a new motor. Your motor is sealed after the test in Sepang. Done. Your engines for the year. So if you've got upgrades, you can't bring them along. So it's restrictive, but they 110% as committed as Ducati. There's no doubt about that. They just lack that little bit, which could be timing in the game, and that's going to come. Like all things, they'll get there. They certainly will.
Yeah, it will. John McLaughlin, didn't the top 5 finished all within a second? Yes, they did. Martin was in 5th place, literally a second and 8,000 of a second behind. So a second, the top 5. So yes, they did, John. And that's what Phillip Island does, because the year before was like the 3rd closest finish ever in MotoGP history. So that's what Phillip Island does. It just does that. Talking about KTM and Ducati, there seems to be a big rivalry brewing up there because, KTM took Jack and some of the top Ducati minds from the factory team and put it in KTM. KTM, or Ducati, I should say, today announced, I don't know if you saw it, Paul, sidetracking off MotoGP a bit, but Ducati are now going into the motocross game.
MotoGP, yeah, I saw that.
And they've taken KTM's blue-eyed or orange-eyed boy, Cairoli, 9-time world champion, Red Bull KTM team manager from this year. I mean, when I read the press release, I was like, no, this can't be real. I know we're not in April, but this Cairoli bleeds orange. The guy bleeds orange.
Absolutely.
And so they've gone, okay, well, you want to take our MotoGP project. We're going to come into motocross. I mean, so there's this European kind of, World War III in motorcycles happening, which is exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's a very valid point that I read the article. They've kept this under wraps 100%. So one of my mates, Freddie Fourie, ex-SA motocross champion, he sent me the link. And then I saw that it was Cairoli who's going to be their test rider stroke developer. I was like, gee, exactly what you thought. I said, imagine now they put him on a Red Bull, a Monster Energy sponsor. I'm telling you, someone will go there and shoot the poor guy. Yeah, unbelievable. But anyway, you're quite right. This rivalry's just stepped up another notch.
That's what I'm saying. I wonder in 2 years' time if there's going to be a big fat Ducati Jack on Brad's table saying, right, we want to do to KTM what they did to us with Jack. Brad Binder, the blue-eyed boy, or orange-eyed boy of KTM, we're taking you. So yeah, listen, it's a nice rivalry to see. Let's talk about Fabio Di Giannantonio, Paul, quickly. You've been speaking about him for a couple of race weekends now, and I've kind of, erred on the side of caution, going, yes, but let's not get too excited. There's a championship going on, and there's a lot going on, and Digi's just kind of, sneaking his way in there. I do think Mandalika, I saw a big change. I saw a rider just with the way he was doing his interviews and everything. Yeah. Whenever the whole of last year and this year, the races that I've been to, whenever you did like a presser and that with Digi, just never presented or gave off the impression that he deserved to be there and that he was a MotoGP rider. He kind of felt like he was, I'm so lucky to be here with the Marks and the guys, instead of going, when Brad came into MotoGP, it's like, this is cool, but I want to destroy these guys. Yeah, Rossi's my idol and I'll always idolize him, but if I see a gap, as I did in Austria, I'm going to shove it on the inside, and if it upsets him, oh well. Whereas Digi came in very respectfully and no, I'll keep my nose clean and I'll play with the boys. I just don't want to be kicked out. I'll play with the boys nicely. And from Mandalika, I saw a guy that believes in himself more. And this obviously came with the switch that, listen, you're not going to, at the moment you have no ride. Never mind in MotoGP, you're waiting for MotoGP, and that's cast out World Superbikes, Moto2. So, and switches seem to have clicked on him, and he's gone. Maybe the fact that Marquez is looking, well, I'll come into that team and do it. Maybe he's looking at this going, geez, you know what? I'm on a golden ticket here. I need to make this work. But something's clicked. So whatever it is, something's clicked. And Digi Mandalika was fantastic, but I was like, yeah, that's fine. But one race meeting, you got to back it up. You need 3, 4, 5 good race meetings. Let me tell you, Phillip Island, the kid was on it from day one. And I was expecting the fade in the race. I'll put my head up. I was waiting there going, yeah, this is cute. Yes, DG, very cute. This is nice. But when push comes to shove, the cream always rises to the top, as they say. You know what? The DG cream was there. He stuck it. And the fact that he put it on a podium against Zarco, Bagnaia, Binder, Martin, and he got himself on that podium. Again, it's not like the Zarco situation where the top boys crashed out and he finds himself on a podium. He found himself on the podium there because of his talent, his racecraft, his belief, his skill, and hats off to him. DG, fantastic ride. Still got to go back it up for me, but certainly, that CV should be on the table of Honda and RNF Aprilia, whatever's going to happen there, because it still looks like Oliveira is going Repsol Honda, and Digi's only possibility is that RNF Aprilia. But another race or 2 races like this, DG, you belong in MotoGP, and you've got to believe it now.
Yeah, absolutely. Remember last year he stuck it on pole at Mugello, round 5, and yeah, it was a bit of a flash in the pan. But that shows 1 lap pace is there, so he's fast. Now you've got to start stringing it together. So jump forward to last week at Mandalika, great ride, finished 5th, consistent, steady. One thing you see with him, he very rarely looks out of shape. He seems to be a controlled rider, which I think shows that he's got the speed and his demeanor is very good. So I was very happy. That's why I mentioned last week. I said, this guy's getting better and better. Now we see him have his best race, sticks it on the podium, looked fantastic from start to finish, even in qualifying. I'm wondering after last week when Alex Marquez wasn't in the garage, is this, with his injury, is this suddenly playing on his mind that while Alex was out, he's the number 1 rider in the team, albeit the only rider, and maybe he's getting a little bit more input from other people? I've got no idea. Did his mindset change because of that? Or did it change, which kind of falls into place more with what you're saying? He doesn't have a ride. HRC Repsol, well, I don't know if he'd want that ride, but to stay in MotoGP, obviously if they chat to him, he's going to take that ride, or RNF. I personally, and listen to what Casey Stoner said this weekend. He said Honda need young blood. So don't look at Oliveira. Yes, he's got the experience. He's going to get better results next year than Di Giannantonio over a season, I would imagine. But stick the DG on that bike and let him start and see if he can build a 5 or 6 year track history on the Honda. Because right now we've got every rider after 1 season wanting to leave, but sticking it out for the 2nd season, except for Rins and Lorenzo. They said, we're done with this. So, Honda are not creating a solution to their problem by getting Oliveira. All they're doing is they're trying to get a result this weekend, and then next weekend. They're not saying, what are we doing in the future? That's my opinion. So I'm hoping that he has another great weekend and Honda look seriously and say, listen, this kid's 24 years old. He's definitely got the speed. Maybe we need to nurture him and let him and Jean-Mir work together, or whatever happens with that. That would be my opinion. I can't see it happening, though. He's left it a little bit too late. But you never know. Honda, I think, are right now stuck with their fingers up there, and they're kind of desperate. But take a gamble. Listen to what Casey Stoner was saying. He said, take young blood. There's no one else they can slot in on that bike for next year. So their choices are limited. I would like to see that happen. I think he's kind of almost built himself into that position, but maybe he's just left it a little bit too late.
Just one of the comments that I said, you get some funny comments on YouTube, and it's here from a Ricardo Gordon, and I'm going to just as respectfully as I can answer this question. You need to stop and come and hear and chat shit. Brad is nowhere getting the best out of what is a winning bike, you stupid. But Pecco and Martin and Fabio are on that bike, they'll win races. So Ricardo, I'm going to take what you say respectively. You don't have to call us stupid. And I'm going to decline, because if you put a Fabio on a KTM, I don't think he'll come near to where Brad is. That's no disrespect to Fabio. He's a fantastic rider, but his riding style won't suit that bike. Martin on a KTM, I think, could be an interesting exercise. I would like to see. I think he could potentially do something. Pecco, I think Pecco's maybe a little bit too precise for a KTM at the moment. KTM's a little bit too inconsistent in areas. It's either good on the front and bad at the rear, and it's left or it's right, or it's hot and it's cold. Pecco likes, fine tuning and stuff. So I don't think he would climb on that KTM and get the best out of it. I think Ricardo, I think the best person that'll get the best out of the KTM is the man that's on the KTM at the moment. That's just what I believe.
Yeah, I think Jorge Martin would be good on a KTM.
Yeah,
I'm not saying he'll be any better than Brad, but I certainly think he'll be good on the KTM. He'll get the same results as Brad. He's more aggressive, certainly, so he might crash more. But I think that he's the only other person that if KTM were looking for a rider and it was an open market, I'd be solely going after him. Exactly what you say. Pecco's too precise. Zarco's already been there, done that, burnt the bridge. So who are you left with if it was an open playing field and you could select? Fabio, he's a world champion, yes, but so is Jean-Mir, and look at the results. Better than Brad? No. World champions at the right time, on the right bike, in the right circumstances? Yes. Had Brad been on a Yamaha in 2020, on a Suzuki 2021, he could have got exactly the same result. Could have. So, I'm going to say that in terms of the KTM, I think the only person who'll do justice like Brad and maybe get one or two better results than Brad is Martin. I can't see anyone else doing it. There's just no one that has that kind of adaptability. The rest of the guys are just too precise. Yeah, I think Marc Marquez could be quite good on a KTM. Also likes to throw the bike around. He's not scared to have it, moving left to right. He's always ridden the Honda like that. So maybe Marc Marquez as well, and maybe we're going to find that out in 2025. But as of right now, it's a pie in the sky exercise, because it's not going to happen. The best rider on the KTM by miles is Brad Binder. So you can't say that someone else would make the bike better, because it ain't going to happen. And the facts are the bike's not that capable yet.
I think we got to go back to your comment about the loyalty as well. Zarco didn't give the project much time. Martin was supposed to go from Moto2 to MotoGP on a KTM because he was with them, and he pretty much threw away a lot of money and cancelled the contract just the same way, and went for a Pramac ride in the same way. So again, that loyalty comes into play. Ricardo Gordon, no problem. He's apologizing for being disrespectful. Then I'm broken English there. Maybe the choice of words not right, but I'm going on about I can understand when people question Brad because he hasn't won as many races or as many championships, but it's because he's not on, as you said, the right rider on the right bike and the right team at the right time. No disrespect to Pecco. Jean-Mir is the perfect illustration. Jean-Mir won his world championship in 2020 because he was in the right team, on the right bike, on the right tires at the right time.
No, absolutely.
And you've just highlighted there. So that's the way we're going with that, Ricardo. I'm going to hit a couple of birds with one stone here. Ruan Dietlef says, one website says apparently Oliveira has asked for a 3-year deal with Honda and a lot of money. And I agree with this, because I'm going to bring in the next comment, which is Wayne Taylor. Oliveira has underperformed terribly, in my opinion, which I agree with. And it kills me to say that in many ways. And we kind of brought it up last week as well, and got a couple of our Portuguese fans upset, and I didn't mean it like that. But I see the Oliveira situation as this. He made this move to Aprilia and RNF to try and just respark something. He said it himself. He found himself in a comfort zone at KTM, which is easy to do because you're getting Red Bull money and KTM money. It's big, but he just found himself in a comfort zone. He wanted to just branch out and try something new, kind of like what Mark Marquez is doing, saying no to gazillions, get out of that comfort zone and try something new to rekindle my career, respark it. Oliveira did that. Unfortunately for Oliveira, he's done it in a team that there's just always question marks surrounding that team. James Dent, our good mate James Dent, says, hi, Robin, hi, Paul. I heard RNF got no funding for next year again. And this is the problem. Oliveira, and I felt it with Darren last year, you go to race by race, you go, geez, are the staff going to get paid this week? Are we going racing next weekend? How much budget do we have? Oliveira, listen, you got to stop crashing. You got to ride a bit carefully. We're running out of fairings. I heard that one interview, and I think it was on RNF's social media, of Wilco Zeelenberg saying, well, we've only got like 13 fairings left for the rest of the season. So I'm hoping and it's that kind of talk. So there's always this doubt surrounding RNF. And I think it's impacted Oliveira this year. Yes, he's suffered massive bad luck. With being taken out. He hasn't been able to show the true Oliveira with everything that's happened. But this is why he's going to Honda and saying, I want 3 years and big money. First of all, he's a smart man. He's a very clever man, Miguel Oliveira. Very, very clever. He knows Honda, how much money they've got, especially now that Marc Marquez is leaving. He knows what they were paying him. They know how much money is released, the fact that Marc Marquez is leaving. He's now saying, right, I want to look after myself and sign a 3-year deal. Because he knows it's not going to be a quick fix. This is not going to be a 1 year, 2 year, even a 3 year potentially. But he wants to give himself a minimum of 3 years of earning good money, because he knows it's going to be a challenge and he should be rewarded for it. And I agree with him. The mental, physical aspect that he's going to have to throw at this, potentially leaving Aprilia a more solid foundation to make this, but at the same time looking after himself and kind of throwing aside all these doubts of, are we going to have money to go racing and. So he's looking after himself first, which every racer should do, to be honest. If I was his manager, which is his dad, I'd be saying, you go to Honda, you're the only real option. You got the ace up your sleeve. So go in there with the biggest terms. Let them come down slightly, for sure, but go in there with the biggest number that you have in your mind, what we value you at and what we value your contribution towards this terrible project is going to be. And if Oliveira can be the man that turns it around, you know what? Feather in your cap. Do you want to be that man? Yes. So I think it's going to happen. I think the Oliveira to Repsol Honda is going to happen. As I said, I think DG will then fall into the RNF. And again, unfortunately for DG, he's going to have to deal with these same kind of problems. Yes, you've got a great Aprilia bike, but have you got the team to get the best out of it? Or you get the team to make the right decisions? Have you got the finances to go? Are you being told, listen, you've got to just back it off a bit. We just can't afford to throw bikes in the scenery anymore. So these are all the kind of things that go on beyond. It's not just as simple as, oh, Oliveira, just take the money. Or, oh, Oliveira, why aren't you performing? There's all these factors that go on. And this is what the biggest lessons I learned from my time in the paddock last year, is that there's so much more. There's a whole world that goes on inside that paddock that we have no idea about.
No, absolutely. And I think that's why Oliveira is pushing for this Honda deal. I also read that article, and when I read that he was looking for big money and a 3-year deal, I thought to myself, but you don't actually have the results or the CV to back it up. Whether Honda want to go for an experienced rider to help try get them out of the slump that they're in at the moment, well, they couldn't do it with the best Honda rider of this generation. They couldn't get it to work. They've had other guys there to try and help, the Alex Rins, Jean Mir, and they're not getting it right. Will Oliveira be different? I don't know how much of a developmental rider he is, because you need someone who can do both jobs. Because if you're going to get someone who's only there to race and get the results, you can't then be asking the guy on Friday morning to test a new swing arm. try new shock settings. Let's do this, let's do that. He's supposed to be there to get the results. Then what happens to Jean Mir? Does he take over that role? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword for Honda. I hear the thinking behind Oliveira wanting to go there. The story that James mentions about RNF, and he was there, Japan and India, so he's probably got a little bit of inside information, which I would say James is on the money there, so, or the lack of money for RNF as it might be. RNF, obviously, at the beginning of the year, by signing Oliveira, were presuming he was going to get these consistent results, let's say 4th to 10th consistently. Unfortunately, very unlucky, got taken out, had some injuries, missed the first 5 races, but that's part of racing. But their point was probably, well, this will help us draw in sponsors. And it hasn't worked. Now, what happens if he leaves and DG moves into that team? DG is not bringing a Portuguese sponsor or an Italian sponsor. I can't see it happening. So that's going to put them more on the back foot. I'm not comfortable with this Oliveira to Honda story, me personally. I don't see any benefit to either side. I just don't. For Oliveira, it'll be a great thing. I understand that. But has he looked at what happened to Jean Mir? Has he looked at Pol Espargaro? Has he looked at Jorge Lorenzo? Guys, okay, not Pol, but guys who are previous world champions in MotoGP. I know Pol was Moto2 world champion. They haven't been able to adapt, no matter what. Alex Rins, 4 races in, was already trying to get out. The 5th race, almost career-ending injury. So it just doesn't sit with me. I still, in my heart, and not because it's the Gian Antonio, and I like the guy for whatever reason, I still think put someone young. And then when I read what Stoner said, I was like, but guys, we've discussed this. Get a better test rider and look at a change. All they're doing now is they're moving out called Marc Marquez, our old hat, and they're moving in a new hat, just with a different name on it. So I don't know, Robert, doesn't sit comfortably with me. Not my decision to make, but my thinking, and I'm a Honda man through and through, would be, let's go back to basics. Start at the bottom. If it means for 2 years we're nowhere, well, so be it. Bigger picture. But I don't know. If they sign Oliveira, then they're certainly not looking at the bigger picture. They're looking at a race-to-race scenario where they're hoping, oh, well, next week we'll get the result. And next week, so that's just how I see the whole thing unfolding. But I understand Oliveira's thinking, this is his career. And in your own career, whatever it is, you want to progress and you want to improve and you want to earn more cash. And so ultimately, I see where he's going with it. But I don't know for me if it's the right way for Honda to go.
It's a big talking point. There's no doubt about it. A couple of good comments here. Wayne Taylor, Mir has only won 1 race. Just we forget that. It's crazy. Little Big Media Co. Brad and Martin on the KTM Moto2 bikes. Brad scored more than double Martin's points over a season. Good fact there. Wayne Taylor, Oliveira is one of those riders that when he's on it, but when it's off, he's near the back of the field. And he is, he needs to be that precise rider. That's why I question the Honda move, just like you do. Someone says here, and I like this comment, John McLaughlin, Rob, do you think Miguel Oliveira can take any more injuries if that Honda decides to eject him mid-corner? And this is the other thing, Miguel is a bit more fragile, but one thing Honda, I think, do look at is Miguel's not a crasher himself. Yes, he's been taken out this year. He's not the kind of guy that, if I don't feel it, I'm not going to push over the boundaries to do it. I'd rather just finish the race and not crash. Whereas at the moment they've got a Mark and a Joan that just can't stay on the bike. So Honda are looking at going, we've got Miguel. Okay, we've got to worry that he's a little bit fragile. No disrespect to him, but he's a little bit fragile with injuries and stuff. But we're going to get a rider that is going to do laps and going to finish races for us. So I can understand that. But
but they had that with Jean Mir on the Suzuki. He was not a crasher at all. Not at all. I think he had 6 crashes in his second season at Suzuki the whole year. Now he jumps on the Honda and he has 6 crashes a session almost. So, if Honda are thinking like that when Oliveira jumps on that bike, could be a different story because it's not the rider that's the problem. It's the feedback and the feel and the way this Honda is working at the moment that seems to be the problem. So if Honda think he's going to resolve their issues, just as I say, it doesn't sit well with me. I don't think it's the way forward for Honda. I think it's definitely the way forward for Oliveira because it fills his bank account. But once he gets on that bike, I think he might be severely compromised by getting on it, and he might become that guy who crashes as much as Marc Marquez and Oliveira and Jean Mir.
And he's got to come to the realization, Oliveira, that listen, that's any thoughts of winning a championship or that gone for 3 years. That'll take you to 30, 31, 32, then we don't know
Yeah.
what kind of condition you're going to be in there. So it's a lot to think of for the rest of his career and everything else. A question that I'm glad's got brought up here by Luis Bruver, who's a person that I got to meet in last year's championship over in America. Great bunch of people. I met him, his wife, and him in America. Hi, Robin Paul. Great show once again. Thanks. Would KTM get 2 more seats in 2025 when Ducati downsized to possibly 6? Now, Luis, this is a very good question, and a couple of people going again. We posted up that Ducati won the constructors title again, in MotoGP last weekend, and well, of course you would if you got 8 bikes. And people forget the problem here is not that Ducati have put these bikes on the grid, and KTM aren't. KTM aren't getting allowed to put more bikes on the grid from a factory point of view. So Dorna is saying, KTM, you can't. We don't want you as a factory, KTM, putting more bikes on the grid. The reason why there's so many Ducati on the grid is not Ducati's fault, really. They've produced the best bike that teams want to buy. So there's 8 Ducatis on the grid because VR46, Muni Ducati, which is run by Valentino Rossi, who's a Yamaha ambassador, pay to run Ducatis. Grassini pay to run Ducatis. So they have chosen Ducati. So that's 4 Ducatis on the grid for teams that pay to run Ducatis. They can, if they go and say, right, we want to run KTMs now, then there's 2 more KTMs on the grid, but they don't want to. They're going to run Ducatis. Yes, I'm sure Ducati sweetened the pot by giving a little bit more development and more parts and more assistance and. But the fact is that these teams are buying Ducatis. That's why there's 8 Ducatis. It's not Ducati that have put 8 bikes on the grid. Listen, Ducati have forked out a lot of money to produce not just 8 bikes, it's 16 bikes, or probably double that because they have all the spares in that. So you think the outlay in resources that Ducati have to do that. And this is where I argue on Ducati's side on this, because why should they be punished for making the best bike? That's why I don't agree with what's happening in World Superbikes, this rider weight thing. Yes, I know it's going to make the championship a little bit more exciting, possibly bring Bautista back into the field and that, but hang on, but when Bautista was on Honda in World Superbikes, there was no weight, or rather, weight didn't come into play. When he was in MotoGP, there was no weight to come into play. The tallest rider in MotoGP, Rossi, always won the races. So Pedrosa was the smallest rider. It never came into play there. It was detriment to Pedrosa because when it rained, he was buggered, or in certain other situations, he was buggered. So I don't agree with all of that. Ducati have produced the best bike in World Superbikes, in World Supersport, in MotoGP, and that's why they won British Superbikes now again. That is why they're winning. So for people to say, but it's unfair, well, it's not. VR46 Rossi with Yamaha badges all over his cap is taking his Yamaha money and giving it to Ducati to buy Ducatis. Is that Ducati's fault? No, they should be applauded. And the reason why there's not more KTMs on the grid is because teams don't want to buy those KTMs just yet. Hopefully that'll change in the next couple of years, but that's why. So I hope that has answered that kind of question and given a little bit more light on that whole situation, that people shouldn't be so, just hard on Ducati and think it's Ducati taking over the championship. They've produced the best bike that teams want to spend their money on and buy. It's as simple as that.
And Rob, it's cyclical. So we know that and it might be 5 years, but someone else is going to take over the mantle and then they'll dominate, or they might have one good season, but go back over the years. At one stage, it was Hondas. Then Yamahas were dominating. It has predominantly been the Japanese manufacturers. It's only recently that it's been the European manufacturers, but it's cyclical. So whenever it is, someone's going to take over that mantle. Let's hope that it's KTM with BB33 at the helm, and we see 2 or 3 seasons where they dominate. And then you'll see that the Yamahas will come back and the Hondas. That's how it is. But as you said, right now, you can't punish Ducati because they've worked to create a bike that is capable of winning a world championship. But at the same time, they've made a bike that is capable of winning in many different riders' hands, where we've seen with the Yamahas, it was basically Rossi and then Lorenzo. With the Honda, it's basically been Marc Marquez. You've got to go back to the Duan era before you had such a dominating single rider on a single machine. Ducati, yes, so they won with Bagnaia, and chances are they could win with him again. I wouldn't call that dominating as a rider, but certainly they're dominating as a machine. And, all credit to them. They've worked at it. And in fact, they've got to give a lot of credit to Dovizioso. 3 runner-up championships and twice racing Marc Marquez to the last and second last races. So he obviously put in a lot of hard yards then, a la the Brad Binders of right now. And just by chance, someone else is reaping all the benefits. But, it hasn't just happened overnight. It's been a long story for them and loads of blood, sweat, and tears.
Love the comment here by Little Big Media Co. And Ducati always make customer bikes that can beat the factory bikes. Honda, Yamaha don't have that same record. Very, very true.
Yeah, true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just that's what shows how good this package is. That as a customer-based bike, you as competitive as the factory bikes. So yeah, absolutely fantastic to see, and 100% don't hold it against Ducati. And I'm not a Ducati guy. I love their bikes. I love the brand. I've been to the factory. I've been in the museum. They've created this over a long time, and it hasn't been a short process. And as I said, it's cyclical. In a few years' time, and without a doubt, it will be somebody else. That's just how it is.
You look in all the championships. You look Moto2. Is it unfair that everyone runs Calyx? Well, no, they produce the best chassis.
The best.
In Moto3, the KTM is the bike to have. Okay, Masia is leading it on the Honda, but it's a Honda and KTM driven championship. Well, it's because they produce the best bikes. There's no Aprilia, and that used to be Aprilia in the 250 Grand Prix days.
Yeah.
So, like you said, you've got to look at it through history. You're always going to have the one that produces the best and most consistent that everyone wants to be on, and that's what makes it exciting. If we didn't have 8 Ducatis, would we have the likes of DJ Antonio being on the podium, or Zarco winning races, or I don't think would Bezzecchi and Marini be the successes they have been in MotoGP if they had started on Yamahas? No. If we had 2 Yamahas, the VR46s on Yamahas with Bezzecchi and Marini now, it wouldn't they wouldn't be doing what they're doing now. So it would make the racing less exciting. So I do tend to favor the Ducati when that argument gets brought up. Honda need a team leader who can break the restrictive Japanese corporate mold, Dick Crosby, and we've touched upon that the last couple of weeks, and the Marquez move has pretty much solidified that. Marquez said, "Listen, until you break your ways, I can't commit myself to the way you guys want to do work. So I'm going." And again, just to finish off on that, I'm so excited for this Marc Marquez on a Gresini Ducati, especially after seeing Digi this weekend. Mark must be looking at going, you know what? No disrespect to Digi, but if he can do that, imagine what I can do. So I'm excited. But we've said it. Honda, they've just got to throw the rule book out now and start from scratch.
Yeah, but they won't, because that's not their philosophy, their mantra, whatever it is. But just on that point, Rob, a few weeks ago, I was very forceful in saying that I don't believe Honda will let Marc ride the Ducati. And it sounds like they're going to, eh? I mean, it's not confirmed, but it's verbally been. Pooch said, no, if he's unhappy, let him ride the bike. So it sounds like I could have, I might have made a fool of myself there, because I was really adamant that they would never let him do that. Maybe that's the turning of the tide. Maybe they're realizing, listen, don't cut off our nose, or stop cutting off our nose to spite our face. Let's start being a little bit more progressive, and what you do on the one side, you do on the, I don't know, maybe that's what it is. A little bit of a change of heart. I don't know. Hopefully, because I'd love to see them back near the front with Digi and Antonio winning.
You know what? I think they're doing it. I think that's the way to go. As you said, just let bygones be bygones. He's brought a lot to you. You've brought a lot to him. What you're just going to look like idiots stopping him from doing a one-day test. Let it happen. Get all the PR you can out of him for the rest of the year. And I see they're doing a great job at that. They're putting him on scooters and they're sending him to this event and that. Do it. Get the most out of him for the rest of the year while he's under contract. Do it. But then after that, forget it. Cut it off. It's over. Marc Marquez and Honda, thank you so much, but it's over. Right. What do we do now? And they've got to have a solid plan. They can't do this milking it or thumb sucking it or just copy what Ducati are doing, they've got to have a plan now. And I think that's the biggest thing why Mark went away, is he went, your plan's not good enough. Your test, you need to change your whole test plan. You need to change everything. And it's the same for Yamaha, as Wayne Taylor says. I think Yamaha is in a worse place than Honda long term. And again, these Fabio Quartararo rides in Mandalika where he's on the podium and right in the mix, you kind of overshadow what's actually going on at Yamaha, because it's just, I mean, Fabio Quartararo, Phillip Island is Yamaha. It's a track where Yamaha should, fast flowing and this, and it should work for the Yamahas and Aprilias, and who also were very disappointing. But Fabio Quartararo, with the right tire choice, in 14th place, 20.9 seconds behind. 20.9 seconds behind around Phillip Island. It's disgusting. I mean, Franco Morbidelli, you talk about, Maverick and Nakagami. I forget Morbidelli even exists.
Yeah.
I forget he exists. I'm excited that what he's going to bring to Ducati next year. I just hope he can also somehow reset his mind from, the Yamaha days are over. I've got to find, Moto2 and early MotoGP days, Franco Morbidelli, because that's what Pramac have signed. They haven't signed Franco for the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's just, and I know pathetic's a strong word, but this is Yamaha. Yeah. It is pathetic of where they are. Fabio Quartararo, 14th. You've just beaten a Marc Marquez who went on a soft rear tire because they gambled. And after the race, Marc Marquez said, we ran a soft tire last year to put us on the podium. That's why I went soft tire now. But it just shows you how the goalposts have moved.
The level, yeah. And also, another problem for Yamaha, whether Honda are using the LCR data or not, we don't know. But they've got 4 bikes on the track. So they've got twice as many bikes as Yamaha. Yamaha are trying to gather info, make changes from Quartararo, who every now and then is on the podium or top 5, and Morbidelli, who consistently is back 5. So it's very difficult for them. They're not moving. So what Wayne Taylor says, they're spot on. They in a worse predicament. They might be getting Quartararo getting consistently better results than the Hondas, but it's not like they're the shining light that suddenly the Japanese manufacturers are on their way back. Most certainly not. And another step there, they're in the same predicament as Honda.
Yeah, it is. There's so much going on in MotoGP, and that's what makes it so exciting. It just keeps you, whenever you think, like this weekend, do I really want to wake up at 1 a.m. to watch a sprint race? In fact, you do. I set my alarm clock. I slept in the lounge, so I didn't wake up the kids and the wife, and I woke up to watch. Listen, it was cancelled. So I must say I hit that snooze about 100 times. So when it was cancelled, I was quite happy to carry on sleeping. But this is what MotoGP does. It entertains you. Heading into the next round, it's so many question marks again. And I can't predict what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. And that's the beauty of MotoGP at the moment, Paul. And, Phillip Island was just another reminder that this truly is the greatest sport on the planet. So it's been a fantastic show. Paul, thank you so much for you. Everyone with all your comments, thank you so much for also, you always, without you, it just wouldn't be the show that it is. That's why we make it a live show, to get everyone's kind of perspective from all corners of the planet. We get everyone's kind of 2 cents worth, and that's what makes it a great show. And I really do appreciate it. I really, really do. So cannot wait until, hi, my name is Denise Gala. I am 80-year-old. Denise, years old. Thank you so much. I'm glad you cleared it.
Excellent.
But from now on, I know Denise got to probably be our oldest viewer. So if anyone's older than 80 years old, let me know. But Denise, welcome, and thank you so much for always tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thank you again, everyone. Paul, great insight as always. The fact that you disagreed with me, I'm going to have to seriously think about having you on the show ever again. No, but I love it. That's why I want to make this an open chat, is to get as many comments and perspectives as we possibly can. And I think it's been a fantastic show, and I thoroughly enjoyed, as always.
Yeah, it was fantastic, Rob. Yeah, so much going on, so much to talk about. And it's motorsport. So as the commentators are always saying, this is not predictable. We can't wake up, turn the TV on, watch the race and say, oh, well, so-and-so is going to win. After half the race on Saturday, you would be stupid to have said Martin's not going to win by 10 seconds. And he finished 5th. So, it's just unpredictable. It's fantastic. I do really believe it's the golden era of MotoGP. Don't want to wish this year away, but with Marc Marquez changing to the Ducati, I think we're going to have a golden plus era next year, but time will tell. Yeah, very exciting times. Great show, and thanks to everyone who tuned in.
Tulani, to end off, great. Thanks for reminding us, Darren Binder. We haven't touched upon Darren Binder. Was going to be a great weekend for him. Q2 looked fantastic. Qualified top 10. unfortunately, when those conditions come, I wish they'd also got to race on Saturday, because I think Darren would have been in for a top 5, certainly a top 10. There's no doubt about it. But the Darren Binder Moto2 process just carries on. I think up until the race where he crashed out, yes, but so did a lot of people, including Pedro Acosta. It's just one of those kind of things. I don't think we can judge him too much on that. I'm liking the Darren Binder exercise at the moment. I really, really am, and I'm really excited. And just a shout out to Rushay Mudley as well, who's going to be taking part in his very first Moto3 race in the Spanish Championship. Looking forward to seeing how Rushay does on a Moto3 bike, because there's no doubt not next year, potentially the next year, we'll see him on the World Championship grid. So exciting times for our South African races coming up. We'll try and do a show probably after his last race. We'll probably try and bring in Rushay Mudley and join us, Paul, get some of his thoughts on the championship and what he's been doing. And that, so I think that'll be a great little chat with Rushay Mudley there. So again, Paul, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone in the comment section. Make sure you hit the like, subscribe button on YouTube, like and share on Facebook. And until next weekend, yes, Andre and Boca, go Boca, World Cup final this weekend.
Absolutely.
They're going to hoy that ball backwards to try and go forwards. I love it. And
as long as they're all on the right side.
I hope Jonty Rhodes can get that wicket right at the end.
It'll be fantastic.
We'll win. We'll win by 100 wickets. That's exciting. Go Boca, and can't wait for the game this weekend and, of course, the racing this weekend. So have a great week further, everyone else, and we'll see you next week, Tuesday night, for another episode of Talking MotoGP. Goodbye.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers, everyone.